Guys, cold temperatures are upon us, at least here in the Midwest. Guys, my name is Rick and this is the HDVIBE channel. In today's video, I'm going to cover some do's and don'ts when we have to put these bikes either up for storage for the winter or we're riding them much less and there's longer intervals between rides. And we'll get into it right after this. That's right, guys, cold temperatures are here upon us here in the Midwest, and I'm going to be riding these bikes much less. I don't put these bikes away for the winter. They do get ridden whenever I have the opportunity, but there's some things, some do's and don'ts I want to talk about today on how to prepare these bikes for the cold temperatures and longer intervals in between rides, or if you have to put that bike away for an entire season. So the first tip is get the fluids changed. I've had all the bikes in for services. They've all had their whatever 1,000-mile service within the last 30 to 45 days. Oil change, primary fluid, transmission fluid, everything has been checked on these bikes. So they are ready for these longer intervals in between rides. So the next thing you need to do is actually fill those tanks up completely with fuel. If you can find non-ethanol fuel, all the better. It's hard to find here in Missouri. In the area where I live, where we have a lot of pollution control additives, you can't really find ethanol. You can out in the country, but that kind of defeats the purpose. So fill those things to the top, but before you do, put a product like this. This is Sta-Bil. And I put that in all of the bikes when they're sitting in the winter, even if they're just going to sit for a week or two, because that will stabilize that fuel. It won't let that octane go out, and it prevents moisture from building up in that tank, which moisture is not your friend in the winter time. So after you've gotten the bike fluids changed, you've got that filled up with fuel, you put some Sta-Bil in your gas tank, the next thing you want to do is really make sure that the bike is clean. This may sound pretty simple, but after that last ride, maybe it's been a little bit cooler outside, you want to get those bugs off. So I'll use my spray-away cleaner, which I had a video on that. I'll use some of this Harley Davidson cleaner here, polish that you spray on and wipe off. And I'll even use a little bit of this Engine Bright to kind of darken up the black areas, that matte finish on that engine, so that it does stay protected while it's sitting in whatever environment that you have to have the bike sitting in. Because as those temperatures change, whatever that environment is, fortunately I have an insulated garage and I do have a furnace that I can turn on, but I don't often do that. The temperature will fluctuate and that will create moisture, both in the tank and out on some of those parts. So make sure you clean that bike down, and especially remember to get those forks cleaned off from all those bugs, because if you don't, you're going to have a pitted mess on those front forks. And that's really important, especially on the ones that aren't either chromed or powder coated. Just those ones that are kind of that matte, dull metal finish, the bugs will just absolutely eat through that stuff and make it look awful. So the other thing we need to do is, obviously these bikes are going to be sitting for a while. We've got all the fuel topped off, we've got the fluids changed, we've got them clean. Now the next thing we need to do is make sure that when we actually do go to ride the bikes, that they will actually start. So the best way I know to do that is actually put a trickle charger on these. These are not very expensive. You don't have to buy the Harley Davidson version. I think I've gotten one for each of the bikes off of Amazon, but I know the last one I bought, which it was under $30. And again, you just plug those in. Most of these all have the pigtails that are going to the battery, and it just maintains that battery. So if you're not going to be riding that bike for a few days, 3 or 4 days, a week, 2 weeks, that's just going to maintain that battery and give you a much longer life on that battery, so that you don't have an issue when you do go to start that bike. The other battery you need to be thinking about is, and especially during the winter when these keys are not being used and they've been used throughout the whole season, is if you have a key fob for your bike with the security system, maybe get some new batteries for that, or maybe even change that out so that when you do go to start that bike up, you don't have a enter pin that shows up because your key fob battery is weak. So the other do that I will do, the bikes here as they're sitting now aren't covered, but get you a good quality cover to keep the dust and the dirt off of those bikes after we've cleaned them up, and they're going to be sitting for a while. Even in my garage, just with the garage doors going up and down from time to time, there'll be dust and dirt that will get on these bikes. So I actually have a Harley Davidson cover that is an indoor cover. It's a high quality. It fits over the bike. I think it's the extra large version. So I'll cover these bikes up if they're sitting for a while. Another thing you should think about is your tires. As that temperature fluctuates, and as you know, when those temperatures go down, the tire pressure in your tires goes down. So on these touring motorcycles, your front usually should be 36 to 38 and your rear 38 to 40. What I do is actually bring that tire pressure up probably 2 pounds over the max. So the front I'll run up to like 40 and the rear I'll put at 42, because it will go down. If you're not in a temperature controlled storage environment, that tire pressure will go down, and as that tire pressure goes down, if those bikes aren't moving much, you'll get flat spots on those tires, and that next time you go out to ride that bike, you're gonna get a bumpy ride. So, and speaking of tires, another thing, if possible, that you can do is try to get the bike up off of the ground, which will help. So if you have a center stand jack or something where you can get the bike completely off the ground, that's ideal. I don't have one for every bike. Fortunately, my floor system sits on top of concrete, but it's actually a plastic material, so no moisture actually comes up through that. So what you're trying to do when you get those tires up off of there, one, you're trying to prevent flat spots. And then secondly, you're trying to prevent moisture from getting in those tires, because moisture can be an enemy and begin to rot out those tires if it's constantly sitting there sucking up some of that moisture from concrete, or even if you have wood on top of concrete, there's still moisture that's going to come out of that wood. So again, bring it up on a jack stand, get it off the ground, or like in my case, I actually have this flooring system which is plastic. And the moisture cannot penetrate through that plastic, so I feel comfortable with the bike sitting there. Okay, so that's a lot of do's. So a lot of pretty simple things that you can do, even if you're just going to be a week or two from riding, that you can do to those bikes to save those. So some things I'm going to say is don'ts. So one thing don't do, and people will do this if they don't have a trickle charger on their motorcycles, they'll actually start the bike up in the garage, have the doors open, and just let it idle in the garage. That's a don't because of this. So one, you don't ever get the bike necessarily up to temperature, or you can actually, if you just have the air-cooled engine, it can actually get too hot and cause damage inside the engine. The other issue is the moisture that is created from that heat, especially when you have cooler temperatures, moisture will form and lay in those exhaust pipes all the way from the head pipe down to the slip-ons, and that can begin to cause rust inside of those areas. So that's the last thing you want to do. So again, don't think that idling that bike is going to keep that battery charged. Actually, doing that is probably worse for the battery. Spend $30 and get you a trickle charger. But if you do want to run it, and it's even the dead of winter, the best thing to do is actually let that bike warm up, because the last thing you want to do is take off when it's cold outside, when those lubricants and fluids inside that bike are thick. Let it warm up to temperature and then take it out and ride it. 5 or so miles, 10 miles, 15 miles. As long as the roads are clear, that is probably your best option. So again, don't start the bike from time to time and just let it idle in the garage. It's going to do more harm than good. Another don't is don't let the bike sit in one position, especially if you have it stored for the entire winter season. And the reason I say that, even though I said get that tire pressure up to a couple pounds over the maximum cold PSI, you still may get flat spots. And the way to prevent that is move that bike around, move its position so that you're rotating that tire just a little bit so that you don't form those flat spots on that tire, and you're going to get more longevity out of that tire, and it's going to be ready to go when you start the new riding season in the spring. All right, and here's another don't. Don't think just because your motorcycle is inside that damage can't be had to it. And what do I mean by that? Well, like in my case, I'm in this nice warm garage. My garage is usually at least 20 to 25 degrees warmer than the outside temperature. And what does that mean? Rodents try to get into the warmth, right? And mice, etc., can get into your storage space, your garage, and they look for warm places. So sometimes they'll go up into like by the car engine, or if you have these motorcycle stored, sometimes they'll get up in that engine and they'll start gnawing on the cables. They'll start gnawing on the wiring harnesses, and that can be disastrous. So don't think they're safe just because they're in the heated garage. I actually put mouse traps in the garage to make sure that I don't have rodents that are trying to come in and save themselves from the cold temperatures, because there's a nice warm garage and a nice warm motorcycle that they can make a nest in, have babies, and begin to gnaw at all those cables and wiring harnesses. So guys, that's a lot of do's and don'ts that we've covered here. So comment down below with your do's and don'ts when you put your bike up for the winter or you ride less frequently in the winter. Things that you have done that work well for you. These are some things that I wanted to share with you that work well for me. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them sometimes people really don't think about. So guys, with that, if you like this type of content and you got value out of this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, share this with your friends so that like-minded individuals can also see this content. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button right down here. It really helps out the channel, and I really do appreciate it when people subscribe. And when you do subscribe, leave a comment down below saying I subscribe so I can personally reach out and thank you for supporting the channel. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon and select all so you get notified every time I do put out new content. And also, check out the over 200 videos I have on tips, tricks, rides, reviews, and installs on these Harley-Davidson touring motorcycles, which I feature the 2023 Street Glide ST, the 2021 Road Glide Special, and the 2021 Street Glide CVO. And with that, guys, I want to leave you with this thought. Life is short. Get out and ride the bike. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye now.